could tell me how you did it.
You like things explained, don't you? How we doing tonight?
Look, that roof's got to be at least 10, maybe 12 feet high. No human can make a vertical leap over 4 or 5 feet tops. I know, I'm a gymnast. Toughest men's sport in the world. Most people don't know that.
The Spartans of ancient Greece were gymnasts too. They vaulted over bulls, trained their elite warriors that way. Did you know that?
I know more than you think.
And you think more than you know. But knowledge is not the same as wisdom.
Yeah? What's the difference?
You know how to clean a windshield, right?
Yeah.
Wisdom is doing it.
Knowledge is not the same as wisdom. Knowledge is one thing, wisdom is another. You can know so much, but never actually integrate or embody any of it. Welcome back to another episode of Through the Lens with your favorite trauma coach, Ashley. Strap yourself in. Today's trip is Peaceful Warrior Part 1. Yes, you heard that right. This is Part 1 of what I believe to be a 3-part series because this gem is just packed with so much knowingness, so much remembrance that the second I started watching it again the other night, I have re-listened to the first 40 minutes of the book, read the book, watched the video multiple times in the last couple days because there is so much remembrance that can occur within those first 40 minutes that I could not continue on. I had to share all of the amazing nuggets that I had already captured and the true message of those first 40 minutes, which is why do we need to take out the trash? But first of all, we need to understand why the heck we want to keep taking in trash. We don't even realize that's what we're doing, but we have been trained to believe that. So today's trip is all things remembrance, so make sure to be prepared and strap yourself in. Oh my gosh, Peaceful Warrior was just brought back into my awareness again about a week ago by someone. They sent me a beautiful quote and I'm like, hey, I know this quote. Where'd it come from? And they're like, Peaceful Warrior. And I was like, yes, that would be a great Through the Lens. So as you can see, here we are today. And as you can see, it has turned into a 3-part series because we first have to understand that there is nothing to learn, my friend. There is no more knowledge to take in, but that is the trap we are caught in. If you look at some of the #1 bestsellers out there in personal development, self-help, and spirituality, the underlying message is, here is your blueprint, here is your how-to, here is the way to solve your problems that I am going to give to you. When I look at the cover of this book, mind you, it's a movie, it's a book, it's an audible, it's all things amazingness. But when I look at the cover of this book, it is Way of the Peaceful Warrior, a book that changes lives. Not the book that will change your life if you follow it. It is not promising you that it has your answers, but it is sharing with you that it will change lives. And it will change lives because it is a book of remembrance, a book that is sparking your remembrance within of what truth is. So we start out and Dan as the picture perfect life, or so we think. He is doing amazing as a gymnast. He has potentials of making it to the Olympics. He has women all over him. He has friends, even though he's seen as the crappy friend, but he just has this picture perfect life, but he can't sleep at night. He has these nightmares that continue to take him to places that he does not want to go. And it just so happens that in the middle of the night at 3 a.m., my favorite number 3, he wakes up and he heads to this gas station where he runs into this older gentleman who he refers to as Socrates, which I find very interesting. And I wonder, is he Socrates or is he Plato? But that doesn't matter. That's for a different day. And so he calls him Socrates. But what happens in that first interaction with the gentleman is, first of all, he realizes he's wearing the same boots as the guy in his nightmare he keeps having. But when he is leaving, the guy is sitting in a chair at ground level. He turns around, turns back. Within a matter of seconds, the guy's on a roof that's 12 feet high. And when we started out this video, you see that's when he is asking him, how did you do it? It's impossible. I know because I'm a gymnast and I should know how high someone can jump. Boom. Right there was his first limit. He limited himself there immediately because the knowledge he has is based on the knowledge he has been giving. He is believing everything outside of him to be true, which in turn then we begin to live by that. We begin to limit ourselves by what we have learned to be truth outside of us. And of course, he wants to be taught. He wants the how-tos. And why? Why is that? Because we've also been brought up that we know nothing unless we obtain the knowledge. We must learn. That is how we can know things. Otherwise, you know nothing. You're born into this world as this helpless individual that knows nothing. Yeah, sometimes we have little ones that we call old souls, and that's just they appear to know much more than they should, when in fact, you know everything. You literally have the answers to the entire universe within, because you are the dreamer of this universe, my friend. And that is what Socrates is trying to share with Dan. But he first has to, like we have to in this video, understand that we have so much knowledge, so much information within that it is clouding us from our truth. It is distracting us constantly. And the things that Dan is trying to learn from Socrates, he again thinks it can be taught, but Socrates knows this cannot be taught. This is something you already know, first of all, and it can only be remembered through experience. So throughout this first 40 minutes, we see that instead of Socrates answering the questions that Dan directly asks, he instead shows him through experience. So one key thing, though, that happens early on that I find very interesting, but also eye-opening and to be truth, is the statement that Soc makes when Dan mentions something about his dream and how he has dreamt about him based on his shoes being different shoes. And Socrates is kind of, his response is like, how do you know you're not still dreaming? And it's like this aha, how do we know we're not still dreaming? And then he says that you can sleep an entire lifetime and not know. Boom, right there, remembrance and understanding that, oh my gosh, that is so true. And for so long of my lifetime, I was sleeping. But then he also shares even deeper, and he's like, we're all fools. And just like I say, we're all just as spiritually poor here. No one is higher up than anybody else. He said, but there is a few that know, that are aware that we are fools, and that is the difference. And that is the difference in which Socrates is trying to help Dan understand that it's not about learning something new, it's about remembering already what is within you. And he refers to it as the trash, all of the trash that is in your mind, and that the moment you empty the trash, which Dan is like, how do you do that? And in the moment, Socrates was going to share with him, but he had to learn through experience. So he throws him off the bridge. And he's like, what did you do? Well, he allowed him to experience it. He gave him the opportunity to spark the remembrance within. And he's like, well, how did that moment go for you? And essentially came down to the reality that he was fully in the present in that moment. He emptied his mind. He emptied the trash, Socrates did, by throwing Dan over. But then we start to see as his mind is starting to refill, and Socrates mentions this, and Dan's like, no, it's not. There's nothing going on. So then again, instead of Socrates telling Dan something or teaching him something, he allows him to experience it, to see all of the things that are actually going on in the park right now that are running in our mind that we are unaware of, that are keeping us distracted from the real truth within. So then it gets way cool. So now Dan is like, man, okay, this is how I can be fully present. And shortly prior to this, Kyle, another guy in the gymnastics team who does the pommel horse, he got injured. So now there's tryouts for this. And Dan doesn't have a reputation of being very good. He is the Lord of the Rings. Rings is where he excels and where he puts all of his effort in. But so there's this opportunity on the pommel horse for them to try out and to do it. But when Kyle gets hurt, we see Dan go talk to Socrates, and he's like, man, I didn't really like where my thoughts went. I immediately went to, how can I monopolize off of Kyle's injury? And Soc makes a really great remembrance here again, a great reflection of, you're not your thoughts. No thought can explain who you are. You have no idea who you actually are. But so often we want to believe we are thoughts, so then we feel shame and guilt and all this junk that keeps us stuck here, keeps the trash continuously coming in. And so Socrates has really just been showing Dan this whole time that it has nothing to do about learning more, my friend, and everything to do about unlearning. Unlearning everything you ever thought to be true, right? That's why Socrates can jump up on the roof of the gas station, because he doesn't follow the law of gravity. Because he knows the law of gravity is something we decided to follow one day, and we just have forgotten that, and now it's deep within the mind. But he has been able to access the mind that we truly are, not this body, and he's been able to cultivate the power of the mind. So that is a risky thing right there, because it is so easy for us to harness the power of the mind through the ego instead of through the right mind. And at one point, Socrates talks about that it's about right-minded decisions. It's really about being in spirit. He doesn't say spirit, this is my interpretation. It's really about being in spirit and cultivating the power of the mind and remembering the power of the mind with spirit. Because when we dabble into the ego, we're essentially repeating what we initially thought brought us here, which was we stole this power from God. And now we have all the shame and guilt. We must run and hide so we don't get in trouble. So you're really just bringing yourself back to the beginning again and starting it all over when you cultivate that power for personal gain. And we see that in magic and manifestation, and that leads into the last, 10 minutes of the first 40 minutes of the movie, where essentially he goes right after this meeting with Socrates, who threw him off the bridge. So he got to experience what it was like to have a clear mind, meaning he had remembrance. It was sparked a remembrance of what he is truly capable of and what his most innate state is, right? When it's something that's innate, it's going to be super easy to get to it when you start to remember it. But you can only remember something through experiencing it. It's not about teaching you something because you already know. So when someone tries to teach you, it's not the same thing. Trust me, it's not, because you only know within. I don't know your answers. You don't know my answers. But we can walk with one another and help spark remembrance to our own answers. And that is what Socrates has done with him. And then he goes to the pommel horse. It's the tryouts. He gets on that thing and he owns it. He masters it. He sticks it's just an absolutely beautiful performance. If you've ever watched gymnastics, it's like, holy crap. He just killed it. And he gets that too. So we see him after have this realization of like, oh my gosh, clearing my mind can just do amazing things. And he goes back to Socrates and he is gloating. He is on cloud 9. And you know what he literally says? He says, I did your magic trick. And you just see the joy and the excitement of Socrates just like seep out of his face. And we realize he didn't learn anything. And Socrates literally tells him, you didn't learn anything. How long did you stay in that state for? This is not some magic trick. This is a way of being. This is what being is, right? Not even a way. I shouldn't even put that word in there. This is being. But instead, you used it as a magic trick for the ego, for a place of fear, for a place of self-gain, for a place of manipulation of the illusion. So you have completely missed it. You use the power of your mind to bring you back to the start, and you missed everything along the way. And he's trying to be like, no, Socrates, I did it. This is great, blah, blah, blah. It's actually like, go home. Go home. You did not learn. You learned nothing. But also, what he's actually saying is you remembered nothing. You remembered just the surface level of your ability, which is, the ability, we can move mountains, we can heal people, we can do all these miraculous things when we tap into the power of the mind. But who are you doing it with? And if you stop short and you just understand the power of the mind, many people do it, right? When they break records of running or holding their breath or all these other things, what they've really done is they've gone deep into the mind where we created that rule that we were going to live by, and they've decided that's not the rule they're going to live by anymore. Mind you, it's all happening subconsciously, but if they're doing it with the ego, then it's just feeding the illusion. It's feeding the shame. It's feeding the guilt. It's feeding the sacrifice and separation instead of doing it with spirit, which is what Socrates is talking about. It's like, man, that was not right-minded at all. You use that for your personal gain, and you didn't stay there, right? Being, it's a place of being, and now he's, of course, he was robbed of the present moment, right? This is what it's always about, is being in the present moment, because that's literally all there is the present. And I always talk about how the ego is robbing you of the present moment by taking you to the past or fear of the future, but it's never allowing you to be in the present. And that's what Socrates points out to Dan in that moment. He's like, hey, you're gloating. You're talking about the past. You are no longer in the present. So we end the first 40 minutes of this beautiful remembrance of Dan and him believing that he's getting it. And then we end it in him fully back in the ego, but this time just utilizing the power of the mind for the ego. Oh, wow. That was some remembrance. I hope that sparked some remembrance within you and helped you to understand why we need to take the trash out. No more bringing in trash in this illusion. Instead, it's time to take the trash out one by one, two by two, however you need to get the trash out. We see Socrates help Dan dump the trash and learn how to do that immediately. And that doesn't always happen that way. And that's okay. But I look forward to part 2 of the way of the peaceful warrior and our ability to then understand what it's like to cultivate this as an everyday being, because we will get to see Socrates show Dan the way, help him remember what he already knows within. But he first had to understand the power of the mind in order to really get it. And I obviously for his journey, he had to experience using the power of the mind for the ego, which in the past I've experienced as well. And there's some shame and guilt that you have to work through around that. And we will see him do that in part 2. That was your Through the Lens, today's trip, all things part 1 of The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. We are covering the video, but the book is just, well, even more amazing, actually. And make sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you do not miss out on part 2 and part 3. I am also trying to get in touch with the author of this book, Dan Millman. If you have any connections, please let me know. I would love to have a right-minded conversation with him here on this channel for us all to understand, like, the man behind the beauty of this amazing, amazing story. And as always, my friend, thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, you are worth it. Much love. Bye-bye.